Every great champion knows that success, overcoming, and winning in life is no accident. Creating individual success is like having a recipe for a great meal. It only works if you know how to use the ingredients. As a best-selling author, entrepreneur, business coach, strategist, and champion, the Lewis Howard Live Show provides you the insider's view on winning. All we do is win, 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 helping you become the best version of yourself. Welcome to another edition of Lewis Howard Live, now Lewis Howard Television, because we've got video. We're excited and thrilled to be going to the next level of our broadcast opportunity, powered by our new partner, Mob Studios in Seattle. Some of the things we're going to be doing is just some new cutting edge conversation video. We're going to let you chat live with us on Facebook. For those that are reaching around the world that we're touching, we're going to have it live up on demand so you can catch us whenever you want to. So we're just excited to continue to make 2020 the best that we can make it and keep helping you become the best version of yourself. Just a little bit on perspective for the monologue, the opening, is this has been a tough year for everyone. No one on the planet has not been touched or impacted by the COVID, the pandemic, social justice reform, elections, you name it. It has impacted everyone. And so it's easy to lose perspective, right? Because if you're listening to the news media, it leans one way. Listen to another station, it leans another way. And so you're trying to find a way, what's my balance as an individual, and what do I think, and how does that affect me and my family? So my challenge to you is to not get so locked into the crisis, although it's critical, it's important. People have lost family members, jobs, businesses. It's critical. But there's also great things happening, and we want to focus on it. Kids are being born every day. Children don't know the difference between a pandemic and Disneyland. So we have to keep things going, and so keep that perspective as a way to manage ourselves through this. We're excited tonight on the show. We're going to have back Dr. Frank Marinkovich with the Regenerative Medical Group in Kirkland, Washington. He's been on it. He was on earlier part of the year. And so we're excited to have him back and talk to you about some groundbreaking medical technology stuff. You don't want to miss this. This is really cool. Even if you're a gamer, you're going to like this one. So stay with us. We're going to talk to you a little bit about that and give you an opportunity to connect. What I want to challenge you is, what good things have you been able to do in 2020, right? Some of you have learned to cook, sew, color, do different things. Email us, hit us up. We may actually put you on the Lewis Howard Live Show to tell the audience about what you're doing. So we're excited to continue the conversation with you. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we got Dr. Frank joining us to give us an update and new groundbreaking technology. You're listening to Lewis Howard Live. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this message.
Lewis Howard of Lewis Howard Live has partnered with Amazon Books to bring you his dynamic, life-changing book. From Here to There is the best-selling biopic journey of Lewis Howard's road from adopted child in poverty to achieving over $1 billion in real estate assets. Lewis shares his secrets and principles, which helped make his meteoric rise to the top an inspiration to millions. Lewis Howard, From Here to There, available on Amazon Books at createspace.com/450-6888. Get it today.
Hey, welcome back to Lewis Howard Live. Thank you for joining us. Your first time watcher, listener, thank you for being part of the conversation. Our goal is always to help you become the best version of yourself, and that includes your health. So as I mentioned in the previous segment, we have Dr. Frank back in the house, and he was on the earlier part of the summer, and we asked him to come back. And we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic, but we're also going to talk about some groundbreaking technology that he is bringing forth out of his clinic in Kirkland, Washington. Dr. Frank, welcome back to the Lewis Howard Live Show. Looks a little bit different than the first time you were on, eh?
Yeah, it looks professional.
Yeah, we got cameras and a whole bunch of things. So you were on at the first part of the year. I think we were on the first part of this pandemic.
That's true.
And our listeners really appreciated a lot of what you had to say then. And so what does it look like now? I mean, what are you seeing in your medical practice? I mean, how are people feeling? I know we talked about the surge coming, but now it's here. What is that doing to the minds of people as they're coming in and continue to deal with this?
Wow. Well, Louis, that's really a great question. It's, I think earlier we may have used the phrase, how do you win a sustainable war?
Yeah.
Key word, sustainable. I don't know. I mean, within this last week, I think both the patients and I were trying to find true north, if you will.
Sure.
Even I think today maybe the patients and I both had a bit of a breakthrough. And I think frustration, maybe a little bit of hopelessness, a loss of autonomy. Looking around, as far as I could see, us Seattleites are, in my opinion, doing a great job wearing masks and obeying all the rules and everything.
Right.
So how in the world, could we have had a surge? Especially now with the holidays coming up, as you noted. So, today, toward the end of the day, walked into a room and just sort of rapping with a patient and, gave him space to be angry. And I think that was good. It's like, well, no, I mean, we're social creatures. We were born to be together.
Yeah.
Family and, crowds and what have you. And so it's not normal. I mean, it's necessary, but it's not normal.
Right.
And I think it's okay to take back some control and actually be upset about it.
Sure. Give us, our listeners, for those that are maybe joining for the first time, Dr. Frank, give them a little bit of your background and how you've kind of come in to where you are, because it's kind of unique and very distinctive for a medical doctor to be where you've come from, and some of the things really that are groundbreaking. We're going to talk about in the next segment, but just maybe give us a little snippet of what, where your history has become to get to where you are.
Wow. That's quite a question.
That's quite a question. Big questions.
Got a long and winding road. There's a song written about
Yeah.
that. That will break into song right there.
Yeah.
Well, my. Okay. Well, I was basically working. I was going to go into the ministry a long time ago.
Okay.
And I was working in the lab, got a degree in biology and chemistry, and the boss of the lab I was working at basically walked in the door one day and said, Frank, what about medical school? I've been watching you. And so that led on a journey. I went to the American University of the Caribbean, so I actually went overseas. I did my entire third year in London, and so I had great training in socialized medicine. Isn't that interesting? I did most of my fourth year at BU, Boston University. Ended up graduating, went to Mount Sinai Division in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and did my residency in internal medicine. Came out to Seattle in 1991 and joined the group, part of a large group, became the head of the group. And then 1999 started my own clinic on the east side. And about 1999 became a sports doc, so internal medicine and sports. And 5 years ago, joined Dr. Henderson, the regenerative medical group, and added the whole area of regenerative medicine. So kind of a long road, lots of background, but really enjoy what I do.
Yeah, I think it's great because for our listeners, I'm a patient of Dr. Frank's, and I'm a guy that did not like doctors, needles, hospitals, or clinics. And I think the gift that I would say as a patient, one of the things that you have is to be able to breed the trust with a patient to trust you, with the process. We use that term, trust the process. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that, you talked to me about, I had never even heard of. I didn't, and I think I came in with a bum ankle and then walked out with a complete medical program. But that's just, it's different, right? Because I feel like in most health settings, it feels clinical, it feels dry. Mm-hmm. It feels like, here, take this pill and call me tomorrow, and if it messes up, we'll try another pill until we get it right, kind of deal. But your approach just seems to be very different in terms of that. So maybe for our listeners, just some of the things that you do in your clinics a little bit different maybe than if they're seeing some of their regular, medical doctors.
Well, my dad, passed away, and quite a story on that one. I'll save it, all that, but. Bottom line is that he had stage 4 melanoma, and he was an athlete his whole life. So I was raised in sports, with my dad, and so I flew down there and to my to my great surprise, all the doctors signed off his case because my dad wanted to go experimental. And I said, okay, so I had to become my father's doctor.
Wow.
And, he was of sound mind, so he was competent, And one thing I learned through that whole process was that one of the things a doc can do, one of the best things a doc can do is fight for the patient. And I tell you, especially this day and age.
Sure, yeah.
And so I did. I learned that very, very deeply. And so I fight for life, and I fight for the patient, and I try to, an enemy against trauma.
Sure, yeah.
To partner with the patient to try and really hear what that patient wants, and can his problem or her problem become my problem as well? Can I partner in with that? And together we're fighting, right? And together, we can use understanding and wisdom and medical science and breakthrough and just not accept the fact that I'm degenerating or what have you. It's like, okay,
Sure.
tell me something I don't know.
Right.
But
right.
How can I accomplish the mission that I was born to accomplish?
Right.
Which is going to be of sound mind and body.
Sure. Yep. Yeah.
So that's what I'm fighting for.
Yeah, and that's in the age of managed healthcare, right, where we don't get better, we just manage whatever it is. That in itself is outside the boundaries of thinking of that. I know some of the stuff you were talking about just at the, your clinic was kind of the epicenter, an area of the epicenter of the COVID-19 when it hit, and just some of the things that you were just sharing about what you were doing to help people. It's pretty incredible. So give us maybe a perspective. Like I got a listener joining, and they kind of dealing with it, and maybe they are feeling that kind of depression.
Yeah.
The term COVID fatigue, right, where people are tired of wearing masks, they're tired of social distancing, they're tired of feeling awkward when they go into Starbucks to get their coffee. What kind of advice or insight that you're giving them, along with the medical piece of this, but what that you're giving to help also balance the other piece of their thinking out?
Well, before the world became so technological, right, and what have you, it was really based on relationship. I mean, first of all, everybody is an individual, a unique individual. And so I think, going back to basics, everything we do is based upon natural law, right? We expect the sun to come up, we expect the moon to be in its right place in the Earth's orbit, and, all the laws of gravity.
My coffee to be ready when I walk into Starbucks.
Yeah, our entire life, our mathematics are based upon constants, right? And so I think maybe going back to those constants.
Yeah.
One thing I was reading about this morning was, called genuine love.
Yeah.
That word genuine is so basic.
Yeah.
But I think going back, that's how we have to retake control over our life. To get back to the basic. We're not being ruled by, right?
Yeah.
And so to have that sense of autonomy by strengthening, again, vertical relationship and horizontal relationship, and working on this thing right here, taking our health back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But somehow turning this thing around, instead of me and the external force ruling me, I need to turn that around where I have control once again and autonomy.
Yeah, I think that thing of feeling powerless, right, and helpless is not a trait, especially of an American, right? It's just not. And I think trying to find a way, and we're seeing it kind of come out in weird ways, with people kind of being a little edgy, right? Because they're trying to look for that place of control. But I also think, too, with the kind of programs that you're putting people through, I know I can personally say that if you can get your health better and you can feel better and not accept the aches and the pains that they say you get at a certain age in life, and you can beat that, to me, I think that's a big step in doing that. So I think you're making a big difference in that regard, because if you can take somebody that's, body is breaking down and also show them how to get back, man, there's nothing more powerful than that. So.
Yeah, and that's why I think the marriage of regenerative medicine to standard medicine is a great link up.
Well, we're excited. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, you're going to share with us some groundbreaking programs that you're launching, and I'm excited to share that with our listeners. You're listening to Lewis Howard Live. Stay with us. You don't want to miss this next segment, because we want to bring you some new medical technology that might make the difference in the longevity of your journey. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this message.
The Millionaire Club charity is one of Seattle's oldest existing charities. In addition to job placement and employment services, the Millionaire Club provides job training and licensing to help workers become qualified and job ready, from nutritious meals and sack lunches to housing assistance to stabilize their lives. Despite its name, the donors to the Millionaire Club are ordinary citizens with a desire and passion to help fellow citizens overcome the barriers of employment and housing. For more information, call 206-728-JOBS or go to millionaireclub.org.
Hey, welcome back to Lewis Howard Live. Thank you for joining us and being part of the conversation. If you missed any part of the show, you can catch us on the download. We'll have it up on the YouTube channel and lewishowardlive.com. We're talking with Dr. Frank Marinkovich with the Regenerative Medical Group out of Kirkland, Washington. Happens to be my personal physician, as well as doing some great work in the Northwest. And so we want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about something that maybe you might not think is relevant to the conversation today, but at some point it's going to be relevant, either to you or to someone that you are in relationship with or in business with. And that is this new program you've got, Frank, called the Brain and Gait Rehabilitation Center. Tell our listeners what that is. That's a mouthful.
Got to go big, right?
It sounds like an attorney group, the Brain and Gait.
Or go home, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, everything is birthed out of frustration, I suppose, right? I have an elderly mother who's 85 years old, and you're talking about the pandemic and all that, and things just begin to break down as I think I like to say, down to a granular level. Mm-hmm. It's probably enough that somebody elderly like that is socially isolated, right? Right. But then you see their what the results of with gyms being closed or what have you, of the increased risk of falls. So a few months ago, a couple of weeks went by in my clinic where it was a bad week. People had falls. People were coming in elderly. And cracked hips, fractured hips, if you would, compression, vertebral compression fractures. A couple of people split their head open. One person died of a bleed in their brain. And I just stopped. But what we did is the treatment was really basically the same treatment that I've been experiencing over 30 years as being a physician. Right. People ended up, they get their imaging, they go to a nursing home. They had to sell their house, all of a sudden a power of attorney. You're talking about loss of life, loss of limb, loss of independence, and yet the treatment was basically the same. And so I said, okay. So I went back to my chief, Dr. Henderson. I said, of course, Dr. Henderson is amazing. He's the chief of Regenerative Medical Group. Yeah. And opened up my mind to a bunch of treatments that we were already pretty much doing as a company. And so with that idea, I put this program together.
Okay. So you mentioned falls, and obviously that's serious business. And I've been around where people, have fallen, and you hold your breath. Yeah. Especially if they're in a certain age category, because you're just thinking, oh my goodness, right? So let's talk about that, because you've got some statistics here, some numbers here that are, kind of eye-popping here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean these are hardcore stats. This is just, this is like, and this is what I'm saying. It's like, 1 out of 5 falls causes an injury such as a fracture or a head injury. We're talking about mortality rate.
Right.
And, one study can be up to 50%, as you can see on the slide. Loss of independence, loss of income. If nothing else, it costs the medical community, if you would, up to $50 billion. So this is a big problem. And the thing, like most of this, with proper intervention, we don't have to go down this route.
Right.
So, in order, just a quick little, mini story here. So my son, is president of Optimum Peak Fitness, and he's working with us here. Right. His name is Luke. And Luke wanted to measure me, put me through some measurements. And then I've been exercising, working out, my whole life.
Right.
Sports doc, right, as well. So I said, oh, no, I don't want, that's okay, Luke, I got this. Right. So anyway, he put me through some measurements, and I basically flunked. And the area where I flunked was actually in my gait analysis. Okay. So I wasn't stable on my feet. Okay. So he's built out a program specific for that.
Okay, so tell us, our listener, the gait, is that The stability piece of it?
Oh, you're walking, basically.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, the walking, okay.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
have
you
to
guys
use-
got that extra credit there. We'll test afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, so just the ability to be stable. So
Mm-hmm.
does that decline over a period of time, over years?
Well,
You
yeah,
just-
it's basically from the age of 50, 55 on up,
Okay,
natural degeneration.
okay. Because you got a number, 3 million older people are treated in emergency departments for fall injuries. 3 million.
It is a huge, huge problem.
It's a big number of people.
Big number.
Yeah.
And again, we all accept the fact that we're getting older.
Right.
We all accept the fact, that we're not what we used to be and what have you. But that's the point.
Yeah.
We can intervene, like I did with my son. I'm intervening right now. I mean, I'm
Sure.
not there yet.
Right.
But I'm working on my nutrition. I'm
Right.
working on my, specific type of exercise,
Yeah.
and a few other things here we'll talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is. I think, again, getting back to that is the culture tells us you just ride off into the sunset, you just accept it, and there is no way to change that. In fact, you get almost laughed at, if you're trying to, be young, if what is what they'll say. But really, when you look at, especially in countries around the world, in Asia, and some of these people that are living to 110, 115 years old, and it look like they're 70,
Yeah.
they're doing something.
Right.
They're just not letting the weeds take the garden, if you will. They are doing something to help fight back. So, all right. So the other one you got up here is what happens after a fall. So now, and I think this is where our listeners can get involved is, if you've got someone that you're caring for, and we know that baby boomers are aging more and they're caring more for their parents. And so they're dealing with these situations. They're dealing
yeah.
with this is live fire that they're dealing with. So what is, when somebody falls, what is the first thing, obviously we know call an emergency, but what are some of the steps that people need to be thinking about when you deal with that?
Well, the first thing, of course, is to rule out a fracture. Not only, a fracture of a leg of the femur, but like what we would call an occult or maybe a hidden pelvic fracture as well, which can be life-threatening because major blood vessels run through the pelvis. But also, of course, as one gets older, the bone mass goes down. So osteoporosis, osteopenia, which can lead to compression fractures. And compression fractures are horribly painful. And again, we have no great treatment for that.
Yeah.
Many times we have to put people who already have an altered mental status, if you will,
Right.
or neurological status on drugs like morphine.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing, though, I think, to be aware of with a fall is the potential of a slow bleed in the brain. I had a patient who had a fall. They took care of the broken bone, they took care of the scrapes and what have you, and had a laceration repaired, was sent home. A couple of weeks later, presented to my clinic. I just had a sneaky index of suspicion, so to speak, right? Ended up getting eventually a CAT scan of his head, and he had a subdural hematoma. And it was really very impressive looking CAT scan because his whole brain began to shift.
Right.
He had to go in for an evacuation. So those are probably the biggest things, fractured bones, fractured hips, compression fractures, and head injuries.
Yeah, and it actually reminds me of a story of a dear friend of mine several years ago slipped down his stairs. And Anthony was in his 40s and slipped down the stairs and developed a bleeding
Yeah.
and decided he was tired and went to bed.
Right.
And that was the end of it.
And that was the end of it.
That was the end of it.
Okay.
So he never woke up.
Wow.
And so that wasn't somebody that was 70 or 80 years old. And it was shocking to all of
Yeah.
us. Like, how could that happen to someone so young and athletic? And so, I guess we are talking about a certain age group, but really, you fall and hit your head,
Yeah.
that has no limits as to who could, suffer that kind of injury.
And those are the dramatic stories, of course. But
Yeah.
the thing about it as well, when you get older, it's really the loss of confidence.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Right.
And then what happens, that behavior begins to follow that. So just not quite as active, being a lot more careful. You're not going for the walks around the neighborhood because the eyesight goes down,
Sure.
the sensory input goes down, the ability to catch yourself at a fall. We just maybe have to say, okay, I'm getting older, the natural rate of decline, but maybe now I have to actually do something to be measured.
Sure. Now you have an interesting time back to COVID. So somebody falls and now they have an injury. They may have to
Right.
spend, extended amount of time in a hospital. Now what's the next risk here?
Oh, that's just it. I mean, you're always going to win by going primary care first, then secondary care, and of course tertiary. But if we don't catch it in the prevention, then the fall happens, and where you end up at is at the hospital.
Right.
Well, probably the last place you want to be in terms of COVID and pneumonia and, and also in other infectious diseases that are there.
This was interesting to me. You have here in the slide, it says medications that increase the risk of bone fractures. So we know that high percentage of Americans are on some form of prescription drugs or medical, prescriptions. So are you suggesting that maybe because of some of these things here that actually, if I fall, then I'm less durable, or is it, what is that, what's leading to that?
So, I mean, when we get older, our ability to respond and react. I mean, if you notice, when people have falls, most of the time it's not because, a 100-pound dog knocked them over or, something dramatic. It's usually something very simple. They tripped on the stair, or, they just tripped over a throw rug or a normal piece of furniture.
Right. Or slipped on their hardwoods like I did. That's how I came to see you.
But it's sort of like, what I usually say to my patients, well, that didn't happen when you're 30, 40, or even 50 years old, right? So it's a normal occurrence that usually happens as a person falls down. Now, as a person gets older as well, it's normal to be on some medications. And so, the medications, once again, can decrease responsive times or have an interaction with decreasing organ function.
Wow. Okay, so that's a little bit. So I always laugh because you get the commercials and they have the side effects, and sometimes the side effects is worse than the cure. That's the whole commercial that you think about. So, so let's talk about. We're going to jump maybe a little bit ahead. Let's talk about some of the things that is impacted. I know we've talked about some of the, obviously physical things, but some of the things that you want to share that's also impacted when a person does fall. You mentioned potential brain injury, nervous system, anything else that, would be added to that, or other things that need to be then?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is mortality.
Right.
So the mortality rate is actually very high. So it's quite a spectrum, because when a person has a fall, they are highly likely to have a second fall. So now what usually happens is that people then begin to say, I got to do something about it.
Right.
But, the body, it takes a while. Yeah. And so that's why I think, going with the standard procedures that we've done the last 30 years, in other words, physical therapy, probably is not going to cut the mustard. Yeah. Because if you've fallen once already, chances are you're going to fall again. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you have either a wheelchair or a walker or an aid, or you're in the nursing home, or there's something that's being acted upon you. Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden you've really lost independence. People now are speaking into your life. They're coming in, they're evaluating their home for you, and they're going after all kinds of things. And the number one thing that people, 50 years old and older, want to keep is their autonomy.
Sure.
So this is really a fight for autonomy, if you will.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead. What can we do about it? All right. So now we know that we've got the problem, and what options are available. Somebody that wants to figure out, okay, how do I fight, Frank? How do I put my Everlast gloves on and start to take this thing back? And I think that's regardless of age, because I think if you can start early on with a good foundation, I think it's the thing that you and I had a conversation about. Start with the foundation, and then if you start and build your core up, then everything else is good. And so I think that crosses age boundaries. But specifically for what we're talking about, what are some of the things that people can do? What kind of tools have you put in place to help?
Well, I think, basically what this program is going to be about is trying to marry the latest we have in technology, which is basically computer, to basically a very individualized exercise type program, if you will. And so that's where we're doing the Regenerative Medical Group. We're using the latest technology, i.e. the brain. We're going to be mapping the brain, and very specifically the motor cortex, and also the primary somatosensory cortex, and just understanding basic,
that just was above my pay grade. That last part, I'm like, what is that? It's a hamburger? Yeah. So to that end, I got to go through. I'm going through the brain mapping, and one of the things that I thought was interesting about it was how my brain looked before, like the 3 steps that it went through, and it was interesting that in color, the red spots versus the blue. And then what cognitive things that, I gave back. How critical is that is when you're just talking about just an age factor, how critical is that cognitive piece to fight for that, as a part of this?
Oh, the brain controls everything.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I love physical therapy. My son is an athletic trainer and a kinesiologist, so I'm totally into that. But if that's all we do, we're working just on, the sort of the end point. But if we can wake up the control center, right, and connect basically the brain to the muscle, that's what we're doing. I guess what I'm trying to say is that degeneration happens, and generation has already happened. So instead of waiting for the fall to occur, let's go through and let's measure it. We can actually measure this area in the motor cortex. We can actually have very good measurements of all various areas that we bring in the psychological component, we bring in the neurological component. Everything is standard medicine that we're putting people through. We have electroencephalogram, and then we have very specific training. So in order to turn the thing around, we actually have to go against natural decline, natural aging, right? We have to measure it, and then we have to have a program to begin to rehabilitate it.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely against cultural norms. You don't hear that conversation, going. It's more teaching, again, how you live with it.
Yeah, no.
Get a walker, get a cane, get, these things that just kind of help you live with it. So that's fascinating, I think, for our listeners that, people are probably going, what? You mean there's a fight? There's something that can be done. What other tools that would be helpful? I know you got some other things that I'm excited about one of them because it's just some cool technology stuff. So
yeah. Well, it's totally tool. I mean, when you look at you went through it, Louis, the computer-generated electroencephalogram to just see, what area of the brain that needs work. Not, in terms of memory, it could be all kinds of things. It could be components of anxiety or depression. It can be issues with sleep or sleeplessness or even quality of sleep. Heck, it can be that the brain is in the wrong brain wave during the wake cycle. In other words, instead of being beta or high beta, maybe because of poor sleep, you're in delta wave, but you're in the slowest brain wave, if you will, trying to accomplish business in the course of the day.
Wow,
you'll get it done, but it just won't be efficient.
Right. So your brain's in night, you're in day.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, but the thing is, we keep doing it over and over and over again. It's like, this is crazy.
Right.
So the first order of business is let's look at the brain. Sure. And we have the technology to do it. So let's map the brain. Let's find out, if we're in the right brain wave, if you will, in the area of whether it's sleep or awake. Let's get that efficient. Let's get that lined up as you went through.
Right. Yeah.
And then let's start there. Otherwise, we're literally burning energy. And the physical therapy or the therapy we're going to be going through won't be as efficient.
Right. Yeah, one of the things I was experiencing just sleep disruption. I couldn't get to sleep. I could not get to sleep. I'd wake up every night at 3 o'clock, and so my morning is disrupted because I go back and then it's 5:30, 6 o'clock. So, now I can sleep 90% of the time straight through the night.
Right.
And I'm surprised. I'm like, oh, it's 5:30. Geez, I slept through the night. But it has been the result of, I think, going through and doing the testing and the mapping and just kind of feeling that cognitive piece just, come back.
Well, here's another exciting thing as well. In this whole brain training technology that we're speaking about, we have a number of caps that we use at Regenerative Medical Group. One particular cap actually works specifically at the motor cortex, and it makes the motor cortex more pliable.
Okay. So for our uneducated, motor cortex, what would that be?
That's the area in the brain that is between the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe, if you will. It's bordered as well by the temporal lobe, and it is responsible for all motor activities within the body.
Okay.
And there's this word called neuroplasticity, or making the neurons more plastic, if you will, that can be trainable. The cool thing is, when we target this particular area in the brain, which we can because we put on the brain cap,
right.
and in the brain cap we have a little electrodes, if you will, that can stimulate that area in the brain. And the technician is right there with a computer that's actually monitoring, measuring, and keeping the brain on task. We can actually increase the brain's ability to be trained. And we are stimulating the brain in order to send down the nerve, the motor nerve, down to the muscle. And so there's about an hour window between stimulating the brain and then going for a specific training, if you will, through exercise, where we can make a lot more gains. So the whole idea here is that, okay, number one, we got a big problem. Okay, we had all these falls, you get older, people are falling, losing independence, billions of dollar mortality rate, loss of independence, family burdens. Oh my God, this is crazy, right? And then say, okay, we're gonna do some exercise. Well, okay, that should have started 20 years ago, right? Good idea, may not be equal to the problem, right? So what do we do? Well, let's use the entire body. What do you know? Let's wake up the brain, but just not wake up any part of the brain. We got technology. Let's wake up the motor cortex. Right? And then with knowledge, we know we have an hour window to bring in a specific training. So we have a trainer at the clinic, right? A kinesiologist who's running specific programs based upon the diagnostics we've done. So bam, we can get this thing, and we can maybe, hopefully, double the output in terms of the success of maybe not being so old anymore.
Man, wow.
You know what I'm saying?
That's pretty impressive.
Well, yes, everybody degenerates, but we can fight it. We can fight it to stay in our peak performance. I mean, it may sound like just a catchy phrase, but I fully believe it.
Well, I know that I'm part of the test case of it, and I can tell you that I am doing things that I could not do before, probably 20 years ago. And, especially running multiple businesses, it's like I'm running people crazy because I don't tire out as easy, right? It was like I have an inverted, like I used to have like one day a week I was good. Now it's the opposite. Maybe one day a week I'm tired.
Right.
The rest of them, look out because I'm going to, run with you until the end. So that is just seeing that. Before we run into time, a couple more things though I want to add. I know that the IV therapy, I know that's a big one. Can you tell listeners a little bit about how that works in conjunction with what we've talked about as far as falls and regenerative, conditioning?
Yeah, I think, it's the whole idea again is like, okay, I fully believe that, we can make a difference, right? I really honestly believe that. But we also have to be aware of the nature of the enemy that we're up against. Degeneration happens, right? And so I think, as I like to always call it, sort of a multi-pronged attack. And so in regenerative medicine, at least in our group, back in the mother company, if you will, which is in California, we have a whole team of pharmacists that actually come up, they read through studies, they formulate various intravenous, medications because of the bioavailability, and they do it specifically to what body system we're working on. So it's like 90-something protocols. But if we're working on the nervous system, or if we're working on the muscular system, there's the whole program called the sarcopenia program. And the IV basically is giving that particular organ or tissue system the nutrients that it needs. So we do that. We have peptides as well, which are specific type proteins that is specific to the tissue. So basically what I tell people is like, come in, let's go through an analysis. Maybe you don't need anything. Maybe you're doing great. Maybe you just need, one thing. But if not, we have many modalities of attacking this thing.
Listeners want to just learn a little bit more. Is there a place they can go, or you want to give them a place where they can just kind of go? We're going to have some of the PowerPoint available for you to look at, but is there any other resources that they would look at or reach out to your clinic, just kind of learn more about this or get involved, hopefully?
Well, I mean, the PowerPoint's pretty good. They can go through that. They can certainly contact the clinic if anybody is interested, and we have a couple of brain technicians there on staff that work. It'd be kind of cool to get tested and see where they're at. So they're, feel free to contact RMG in the Kirkland office.
Awesome. Frank, thank you for coming back and joining us. This is super insightful, and it's a lot, and it's medical, but take good notes and watch it a few times. It'll sink in. But mainly, I think it's creating an awareness that you can do something about living life to the full. You don't have to accept it.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are tools out there and resources out there, as we've talked about, to help you, be at your best. You don't want to be at your worst when you get to 50. You finally get there, and now you're declining, so you can't make a difference in your world. And so we want to help you become the best version of yourself so you can help the next generation get there as well. Thank you for joining us and being part of the conversation. We look forward to another episode on Lewis Howard Live. Remember, you can get us on the YouTube channel. You can get us on lewishowardlive.com. You can get the audio version of the show on Blog Talk Radio, Podcast, Apple, iTunes, and so many other places. And we appreciate each and every one of you around the world, from the first listener today to those that have been with us since the beginning. And we'll look forward to having you back on another conversation with Lewis Howard Live. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.